These days, it can be hard to trust the media. What's true, what's fake, and who is behind the message? I'm a freelance journalist and videographer who has spent years studying the media. Now I'm taking a look at what... Hello and welcome to Common Sense. I'm Dominick Bonny, and in this episode, we're going to speak with local author Teri Fink, who released a new book this year titled The Clovis Dig. One reviewer described it like this, quote, "Archaeology and murder mix in this smart, picturesque novel that's steeped in local culture," end quote. It's a great interview and I want to jump right in. But before I do, I want to briefly touch on the situation in the Ukraine and recommend this month's cover article in The Atlantic, titled "The Autocrats Are Winning." In it, the immensely talented journalist Anne Applebaum writes, quote, "All of us have in our minds a cartoon image of what an autocratic state looks like. There's a bad man at the top. He controls the police. The police then threaten the people with violence. There are evil collaborators and maybe some brave dissidents. But in the 21st century, that cartoon bears little resemblance to reality. Nowadays, autocracies are run not by one bad guy, but by a sophisticated network composed of kleptocratic financial structures, security services, military, police, paramilitary groups, surveillance, and professional propagandists. The members of these networks are connected not only within a given country, but among many countries. The corrupt state-controlled companies in one dictatorship do business with corrupt state-controlled companies in another. The police in one country can arm, equip, and train the police in another. The propagandists share resources. The troll farms that promote one dictator's propaganda can also be used to promote the propaganda of another. And themes, pounding home the same messages about the weakness of democracy and the evil of America. This is not to say that there is some super secret room where bad guys meet, as in a James Bond movie, nor does the new autocratic alliance have a unifying ideology. Among modern autocrats are people who call themselves communists, nationalists, and theocrats. No one country leads this group. Washington likes to talk about the Chinese influence, but what really bonds the members of this club is a common desire to preserve and enhance their personal power and wealth. Unlike military or political alliance from other times and places, the members of this group don't operate like a bloc, but rather like an agglomeration of companies. Call it Autocracy Inc. Their links are cemented not by ideals, but by deals. Deals designed to take the edge off Western economic boycotts or to make them personally rich, which is why they can operate across geographical and historical lines, end quote. Tyranny, like everything else, has become more sophisticated. But why should we care what dictators like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have planned for their parts of the world? Whether that be a potentially imminent invasion of Ukraine by Russia or a takeover of Taiwan in some near-distant future. Don't we have bigger fish to fry on the home front? Aren't we done being the policemen of the world? So what if Russia invades the Ukraine and takes over, just like they did with Crimea back in 2014? Because tyranny is contagious. Autocracy thrives and spreads in the face of weak democracies. President Joe Biden has already signaled weakness in the face of tyranny through our hasty and haphazard withdrawal from Afghanistan, in which we left both our allies abroad and in-country scrambling. Putin knows that we probably won't lift a finger over anything unless our national security is directly threatened. And the last thing Putin wants is Ukraine in the NATO alliance, which is exactly why they should be. The purpose of NATO in the first place was to cage the Russian bear. And with Russian troops amassing on the Ukrainian border, looking like they might invade in early 2022, the bear needs to go back in its cage, or the cage needs to get bigger, or both. I highly recommend checking out this month's issue of The Atlantic, which you can read for free via the NCW libraries with an e-card. Now, though, let's get to my interview with local author Teri Fink about her new book titled The Clovis Dig.
I started as a reader before I became a writer. I loved to read. When I was young, I would read these sort of romance mysteries that took place in the moors of England, and gradually worked my way up from there. It wasn't until I took a English class as a freshman in college that I had to write for the class for a professor. And it's his fault because he gave me positive feedback and said I had some talent there. And that's kind of the spark that got it going. I didn't start writing novels until many years later. But the first thing I did write the first things I wrote were magazine articles. I was working as librarian because I loved books, and I started doing some freelance magazine work. And then probably, decades later, I started novel writing.
And when you were a librarian, was this with the schools?
I was librarian after college at Wenatchee Public Library, at Wenatchee Valley College Library, and then I became librarian at Eastmont High School, and that's where I got introduced to the Clovis project, and then I was librarian at Wenatchee High School. So I pretty much covered all the libraries I could in Wenatchee.
Very cool. And so you have 2 books so far that you've published.
Right.
Can you tell me about, let's start with your first one.
Okay. Well, as I said, when I was a younger reader, I always liked the Victoria Holt mystery romance on the English moors. And so when I sat down and decided, you know what, I want to write a novel, I wanted to write what I had liked. So that's what I started. And that became Invisible by Day. And that turned out to be, years before Downton Abbey was popular.
Yeah.
But when Downton Abbey got popular, then I got a publisher who got interested in this one.
Okay.
So Invisible by Day is about a woman in England who's a servant, and she's ambitious and wants to work her way up. But she makes some pretty bad mistakes along the way, has a guilty conscience, and when World War I comes along, she has a chance to redeem herself.
Very cool.
What I didn't know when I started writing Invisible by Day was that they say to writers, write about what you know. Well, I didn't even know what year it was when I started. I mean, I just started with this servant in this house and, the handsome guy that she falls for. But I didn't know what year it was, what the technology was, were the gas lights, were there cars.
Yeah.
So it took a ton of research. Luckily, I was librarian at the time, so in those pre-internet days, I had a lot of information at my fingertips. So tons of research. It's a bit of a gritty book as far as Downton Abbey kind of stuff. But that was my first one. And then in 1988, I was librarian at Eastmont High School, and I went with, I think it was Mike Beck's social studies class. They had found these artifacts in an orchard in East Wenatchee, and he took his class. They were actually doing an archaeological dig, and I went along with his class, and it was fantastic. I mean, for somebody, didn't we all grow up reading National Geographic, Pompeii, archaeology? We all saw, I'd always been fascinated. So to see it in real life, it just grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
So what I started doing was clipping everything that was written about the dig at the time, about the find, about the artifacts, about the science, and I just kept it all. Really? And the National Geographic article that appeared in. And then I decided after a while that there was so much drama that happened in real life that this was a novel. And so I sat down and with all my research and started writing the Clovis Dig. And the science, I tried to keep the science is as close to the real science as I could make it according to the research that I had.
Right.
So anyway, that's how both of those books got started.
Wow. And so briefly, without spoilers, give me, kind of the plot or, the bullet points of the Clovis Dig.
Sure. Well, Claire Courtney is an orchardist in East Wenatchee, and she's having some financial difficulties, as orchardists often do. She's in debt to the bank. When these strange Clovis points are dug up in her orchard, she doesn't know if they're significant. She doesn't know if they are significant, if that will help her or be the end of her orcharding. And this is a family orchard that she's inherited, so it means a lot to her. So she contacts Washington State University, and Joe Running is a Native American rookie archaeologist who comes to investigate, and he determines that, yeah, this is something important. And then she's approached by the big Clovis expert, Spencer Grant, from back east, and convinces her to let him take over the dig because he knows what he's doing. Then there's conflict between the archaeologists, and then they dig up something totally unexpected. An investigation of a different kind begins.
Wow. Cool. Very cool. So it's a little bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
It's a fiction, but based on local history, because the Clovis points, you know, those are a huge part of our history.
Yes.
And I was trying to remember exactly, you know, not exactly because there's no exact nature to that, but when were those points buried?
They are about 13,000 years old. Yeah, they are ancient. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've been to Athens and I've seen the Acropolis, and I was speaking with Mary Big Boldos, a friend of mine who's native, and it's just wild to think that, like, you know, you go and see 2,000-year-old history and you're like, wow, this is ancient. I'm stepping where ancient people stepped, but we have 13,000-year-old artifacts right under our feet here. It really gives you a perspective to the fact that, you know, you think of history being in Europe or being in Rome or something like that. No, history is right here, right below us.
That's so true.
You know?
And not only were there artifacts, but there were mammoth bones, decorated mammoth bones. It actually had bovine blood on them, which helped them carbon date the artifacts. Yeah, yes.
So writing and being a writer in this local area, because it seems like you really migrated. You have your first book is set in the UK, and this one's set locally. Is that, you know, as you continue in your career or in your passion with writing, do you find yourself gravitating more towards, like you said, write what you know here locally?
Exactly, and that's exactly what happened. After I finished Invisible by Day, I realized, yes, write what you know. And I had all the material for the Clovis Digs. And I lived in Wenatchee. Apple orchards, if you've lived in Wenatchee for a long time, I picked cherries when I was a teenager. I worked at Columbia Fruit sorting cherries as my summer job from school. Out of college, not only did I work at the libraries, I worked in a few jobs. I worked at tree fruit research and entomology. My house growing up was surrounded by apple orchards. I mean, surrounded. So I knew the culture of Wenatchee because I'd lived it. And one of the things that I'm thrilled about is in the reviews, they talk about how this is steeped in local culture. It's steeped in culture. So for people who live in Athens or back east or anywhere but an agricultural area, this is foreign territory. But to us who live here, this is every day. So I'm thrilled that the reviewers liked the culture of Wenatchee that I was able to share.
Right. Yeah, that is a cool part of it, because you forget when you grow up here and you live here how our experiences aren't like other people's.
Right.
And they are novel to, you know, not novel as in a novel to read, but a novel, unique.
Yes.
Unique experiences. And so that's cool that you can, it's cool to see that being exported, because it reminds you, wow, we do have something kind of special here.
We do.
You know, very unique culture and history specifically. How long did it take you to write each of your novels?
Well, both of these books I started in the 90s, and both of them I was busy with a career. Not only was after my librarian careers, I decided I wanted to make a living as a writer. And so I went into marketing communications at now Confluence Health, and I did that for a decade, and then I finished my career at Wenatchee School District in communications. I was a communications officer.
Stay tuned after the break for more.
When it comes to finding a memory care community, you want the very best. You want to know that your loved one is safe and receiving compassionate care in a loving environment. Fieldstone Memory Care is an innovative assisted living community designed for those with Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's disease. You'll find a community specifically designed to enrich residents' lives. The Fieldstone team is here to help you navigate the important decisions you face when a loved one has dementia or Alzheimer's. Welcome home to Fieldstone.
You're in Ford Country, land of Pat Armstrong, Ford Lincoln, home of the lifetime warranty. That'll sure get you thinking.
Get ready for fall and winter with a new or used truck or SUV from North Central Washington's four-wheel drive headquarters, Pat Armstrong Ford Lincoln, on 3rd Street in East Wenatchee.
Land of Pat Armstrong, Ford Lincoln, you're in Ford Country.
Fall in love with high-speed internet from Localtel Communications. Cuddle up and stream unlimited movies and TV with SureStream TV. With speeds up to 1 gig, you can download music, apps, and games in seconds. Shop, stream, surf, and game like never before when you fall in love with Localtel. Call 509-888-8888 today.
Who are you talking to? I told you, knock it off!
End the cycle. Call SAGE, Safety, Advocacy, Growth, and Empowerment. Get private, anonymous counseling. Learn how SAGE can help you. Receive legal assistance and protection. SAGE also offers a safe place for you and your children. Of course, a hug from Hank always helps. SAGE can help you move on with your life. Call SAGE today.
The Culinary Apple in downtown Chelan is your specialty gift and gourmet cooking store. Find everything from homemade fudge to kitchen gadgets for your favorite chef. Your holiday shopping is a one-stop experience at the Culinary Apple.
This Christmas, shipping and receiving is more important than ever. Jerry and Sherry are here to help. Mailboxes Chelan provides everything you need to get that special gift delivered for the holidays. Given this year's challenges, you must ship early. Visit Mailboxes Chelan today.
Welcome back. Let's get straight back to my interview with local author Teri Fink.
So these books got put in a drawer. I worked on them in the summertime when school was out and I had a little bit more time. But it wasn't until I met the publisher, and I met the publisher to Invisible by Day, the original publisher, at the Right on the River conference in Wenatchee. And I was pitching another nonfiction book that I had, and they weren't interested. And on a whim, I said, well, I do have this Downton Abbey setting book. And they said, that one we want to see. And so then I had to go back and dredge out this old manuscript, and it took me probably a year and a half to re-edit it. And then the same thing with actually the first publisher of this book, they closed. And so I luckily got another publisher, and they signed me to a 3-book contract.
Okay.
So I had to pull out the Clovis Dig manuscript because I'd actually completed it, and I'd actually met with a publisher in Los Angeles who looked at it and gave me some great advice. And so it probably took me 2 years to edit that old manuscript to become the Clovis Dig that it is today. So it took a while. Now I'm working on my 3rd book, and again, it's something I've been working on for a while, but now I will pour all my attention to it, and I expect it to take a year to 2 years.
Wow. And are you in the beginning stages of that process?
Yes, like I say, I have a lot of stuff written down and in process. And then I'm going back and revisiting it with a kind of a different slant to it.
And can you share anything about that one?
Well, I wouldn't want to, dissipate all that creative energy.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that.
I will tell you, though, one thing about the Clovis Dig and this next book is I did try to keep local settings, at least in part of it.
That's cool. That is very cool. What advice would you have to maybe people who are looking to become writers or try their hand at it?
Well, the first thing is to be a reader. I know you're a reader, you're a writer. If you have to love books. And I think reading a lot of different books is a huge help. It opens your eyes to just what's out there, what's successful, and the creative way that different people tell different stories. I have a lot of favorite writers. Amor Towles, a gentleman in Moscow, is sort of my new favorite writer. I actually quoted him in the Clovis Dig because I was reading his second book, Rules of Civility, while I was finishing editing the Clovis Dig, and he was talking about orchards, he was talking about archaeology, and I thought, well, these have to go in the book.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, advice to writers, actually it's something I watched in an Amor Towles interview, is the importance of characters. I mean, you can have this wonderful setting of Wenatchee and this fascinating archaeology, but if you can't bring your characters to life, if you can't make the reader feel that they really know them, that they can hear the teacup being set on the table in frustration, or the emotion, or the past. Why does this character behave the way they do?
Yeah.
Maybe they're kind of cranky. Why did how did they turn out this way? And so I think bringing your characters alive is the number one thing, the number one advice I would give.
So where can people find your book? Because one of the reasons I wanted to have you on my show this week was because we're coming up on the holidays, and I am a huge fan of buying local.
Yes.
Things that have local meaning. So, something that connects the community, not just Amazon.com.
Right? I get you. I agree 100%. So luckily, A Book for All Seasons in Leavenworth is a local, independently owned bookstore, and they carry the Clovis Dig, so you can buy it there. And that is the only local bookstore that carries it. But it can be purchased on any online store. And it's available in paperback. You can buy an ebook, and it's out in audiobook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is pretty fun.
Wow. So you can get it on Audible or any of these things?
Yep,
Okay.
Audible or any audiobook outlet.
Very cool. Very cool. And how long has it been out?
It was published May 3rd of this year, 2021.
Great.
And you know what I did during during the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
It was a year that I had to work on the book.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, it worked.
Kind of worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Is there anything else that you think the public should know about your book, your new book, your writing, or anything else?
I hope your readers, if you do read any of these two books, either of these two books, I hope you enjoy them.
Great. Awesome. Well, I hope that people do buy them, support you as a creator, an author, and enjoy them, because it's really cool. I think, that you're just a part of our art scene, but we do have actually a pretty cool, vibrant art scene. And Right on the River, you mentioned, which is a great organization to get involved with. But, even outside of literature and literary stuff, there's a lot of art here locally.
Well, and since you mentioned that, I will tell you that serendipity was at work when I was finishing up this book. I noticed that Wenatchee Valley College was offering a class on a film that was made by the Leavenworth Icicle Arts.
Oh, wow.
And it's called The Winter's Tale. And it's a movie, that has Native American storytellers, and it has a geologist. And it's a marriage between the local geology of our area and the Native Americans' legend that explains the geology. Right. And the star of the show is a Clovis Point. Really? And I just happened to notice this class, so this opportunity to watch the film and then participate in a talk about it. And I ended up being able to include briefly that legend in part of the book. Because part of this book, too, that really happened was there were Native American protests at the time.
Oh,
They feared that their ancestors were buried there. They felt that these were their ancestors, although scientists at the time didn't think they were.
yeah.
And there's a great leader of the Colville tribes that's a character in the book, and his daughter. And when they come to these protests and they see the Clovis points, he shares a little bit of that legend. So that was a thrill to be able to have that real local Native American lore come to my attention at just the right time and able to have it in the book.
Very cool.
And by the way, I did share this book with the Colvilles when I was almost done with it, to be culturally sensitive, because Native Americans are a big part of this book.
Yeah.
Joe Running, one of the archaeologists, is Native American, and the local tribes were very interested in the dig, and they were very helpful. They made some suggestions, and other than that, they gave it their stamp of approval, so I appreciated that.
Very cool. Well, that's great. Awesome. And thanks for sitting down with me and talking about your book.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Dom. It's always a pleasure to talk books with you.
That was a fascinating interview about a fascinating subject. Remember, you can pick up her new book at A Book for All Seasons in Leavenworth, and it's also on Audible. I'm glad Teri could sit down with me and talk about her new book ahead of the holidays, because it makes for a great gift that's rooted in local history and culture. I'll provide a link to Teri's website as well as information on A Book for All Seasons in the show notes for this episode. If you'd like to find the transcript and sources for this episode of Common Sense, just go to ncwlife.com and find the full episodes tab. Click on that and scroll down until you find Common Sense with Dominick Bonny, and then click on that. This episode, episode 54, will be near the top. That's all for this episode of Common Sense. I'm Dominick Bonny, and we'll see you next time for more conversations about our region.
What's troubling you?
No one cares about insulation.
Out of sight, out of mind, I guess.
But it's just so effective and inexpensive. It's one of the best ways to warm your home. Shein's PUD $1 per square foot rebate can often pay for the cost of a DIY blow-in installation to an attic. So are you gonna check out the rebates at SheinPUD.org/save today?
Yeah!
Can you help me down? Just go to SheinPUD.org/save today.
I'm Dr. Wayne Latimer. I'm a chiropractic physician. I have postgraduate certifications in both whiplash, trauma and rehab, as well as sports medicine. The location is great. The light and the visibility, the 17-foot ceilings are fantastic. You can go into a lot of clinics, and it's very clinical. People really like the spa environment, so my whole premise was take a spa environment, add the very serious rehab, and give people an enjoyable way to get better over time.
Hi, I'm Jim Heinlein, independent agent at Springwater Insurance Group. And for next year's plans, there's some really special ones coming out. One in particular has no premium to it. 0 premium. That's pretty neat, especially if you're a veteran who has TRICARE or VA or CHAMPS VA, because you can utilize 2 plans at the same time. If you have questions about this and like more information, give us a call at 888-2600.
You know, I have different people in the community come up and tell me that they've seen our commercial. I took my family up to Yodelin up in Leavenworth, and we walk in and it's a Monday night, so Monday Night Football is playing, and all of a sudden our commercial starts airing. And my kids couldn't believe it. They're like, Dad, you are on Monday Night Football. This is unbelievable. You know, we know somebody famous. Like, my respect level just went way up in my kids' eyes.
We have, over the last year, realized how important Apple Blossom is, how important those Friday football games are, and being a part of that community and being able to support those activities happening is very important to us. One of our real passions as a business is to serve our community well, and at the same time promote our brand. And I feel like NCWLIFE allows you to do that with some of the different
opportunities that they give you. There's ways to help us build community while at the same time promoting your brand.
Are you wanting high-speed internet but don't have access to PUD fiber? Try Sky-Fi high-speed wireless internet from LocalTel. Call 888-8888 today.